Hey there, and welcome back to Utility Sports. In today's video, we have a really fun one for you. We are going to be ranking the conferences for college football. You have the big powerhouses like the SEC, you have some of those middling conferences, and also you have some of the weaker conferences. And I think this is a really good debatable topic. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new and like the video if you do enjoy the content that you see today. So jumping in here at number 7, you kind of look at the Sun Belt Conference, and this is a conference that's had some competitive teams over the last couple of seasons. You'd like to revert to Appalachian State, Coastal Carolina, Marshall, Louisiana, Monroe. I think that this is a conference that, definitely could swing the pendulum a little bit, but I think they're kind of set in either seventh or sixth, to be completely transparent. I'm kind of curious with Louisiana, Monroe, with Billy Napier leaving, where does that leave that conference overall? I think that the Sun Belt Conference is pretty firm here at number 7. They have 0 teams inside the top 25 of the rankings in the preseason, so they are going to stick here at 7. At number 6, we have Conference USA, and there's some dogs in this conference. I'm going to be honest with you. There's 2 teams in the top 25 of this conference. Some of the teams that are kind of notable, you got UCF, you have Cincinnati, which obviously Cincinnati was a big Cinderella story last year. You also have Houston, who surprised a lot of people in this conference. Once again, I think they're very well primed to have another big season. They very well could win at least 9 games, in this conference. 10 games, very realistic as well. Another team that is very consistent for the most part is SMU. They just know how to win football games, and they produce quite a bit of NFL talent for the size of the school, the prestige of the school. Conference USA is competitive. Once again, once we have some of the division, in these conference realignments, it's going to kind of change the complexion of what Conference USA is now and in the future. So that's something that we have to kind of consider. But Conference USA is a conference that's going to be kind of staying here at number 6. And now we kind of get into some of the bigger conferences, some of the bigger players. But I like what I've seen. From the Conference USA for sure. UCF, definitely a school that's been on the national radar. If you think back a couple years ago, they were proclaiming themselves as national champions. They produce a lot of NFL talent. Cincinnati obviously had a huge year in terms of producing NFL talent and finally getting some national recognition. Desmond Ridder, Sauce Gardner, just to name a few of those guys that ended up going pro. The next one here, we have the Pac-12. Pac-12, little more of a storied conference compared to the first 2 that we had named, but to me, this is a little more top heavy, if I'm going to be completely honest. You have USC with Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams coming over from Oklahoma. That makes them immediate contenders in college football. Just having Lincoln Riley's presence definitely shoots you into that conversation for sure conference winner, and then eventually, maybe you start talking national championship conversation. Another team as well, Utah. I mean, Utah has been very consistent. They've been good. This is a team that people don't want to see when it gets deep into the season. And then Oregon obviously has built up some really good prestige over the last decade for sure. A lot of notoriety, big in your face branding. Mario Cristobal going to the University of Miami has really kind of shifted the balance of what this Oregon team can be. But for sure, the Pac-12, I feel it's top heavy, and I think there's some natural regression within the conference itself. Teams like Oregon State, Stanford, Cal. I think those are some teams that might be trending down just a little bit right now. I feel it is very top heavy with some of those teams. However, there's some very competitive teams in this conference. So Pac-12 is going to be staying here at number 5. Number 4, we have the ACC, and the ACC is once again a conference that is on the rise. I feel Clemson had a down year. I think Miami's going to have a very strong year. Once again, re-alluding to Mario Cristobal, This is a team that's primed to make a deep run. You have Pitt, you have NC State. Louisville is another team that could squeeze into that top 25 conversation, but the ACC, collectively speaking, has 5 teams in that top 25. So you got to respect the hustle from what you've seen with the ACC. Clemson's done a really good job, over the last couple of seasons carrying this conference and the prestige of the conference. But another team that we can't forget is Wake Forest. I mean, you look at Sam Hartman and what that Wake Forest team has become, once again, producing quite a bit of talent in the NFL. But those are just some teams to kind of name a few, honestly. I think the ACC is a competitive, strong conference, but once again, I think the depth of this conference, towards the top, slightly pushes them over, say, the Pac-12, just because it's not as top heavy, a little bit more in the middle, a little bit more substance there. And once again, Clemson's going to be back. They're going to be a team that's really, really competing over the next couple of seasons. Dabo Swinney's done a really good job recruiting, and he does a phenomenal job finding that quarterback position. Case in point with Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, just to name a couple of examples on what Dabo has been able to do, for this program. So the ACC sticking at 4. At number 3, you got the Big 12, and the Big 12 is a conference that, once again, is kind of transitioning. Obviously, with Texas moving on and Oklahoma moving on late, in the future, the time is now. And ranking them here, the reason you have to do it is, once again, you have Texas, you have Oklahoma. Oklahoma State obviously was a team that was super, super good last year. You have Baylor, another team that was absolutely terrific. That kind of, holistically speaking, that's a phenomenal group at the top of that conference. You also have teams like, Texas Tech. You have TCU. Those are some very good teams in that middle. Kansas State's also super competitive as well. So overall, I like what the Big 12 has to offer. I think Baylor is a tough team to beat. Oklahoma State's gritty. Now, this is not a conference that's going to recruit a lot of big time recruits. However, they get their fair share for sure. I think the Big 12 is one of those conferences that does actually tend to get, underrated overall. But once again, a conference that produces a lot of NFL talent. I love the in-state rivalries, especially with those Texas teams. It just makes Big 12 football feel that much bigger. So I don't think that we're doing the Big 12 a disservice here, being at number 3, but I think right now there's 2 conferences that, slightly edge them out, at this point. So overall, kind of recapping here, Texas has been able to kind of rebuild some program prestige, especially getting some big time transfers. That has elevated the ceiling of that team. Baylor's done a phenomenal job kind of building this program from the bottom up again, and retooling and re-identifying, what they are, what their strengths are. So for sure, you have to consider Baylor in that conversation. Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy has done a terrific job with this program. He doesn't net a ton of the top recruits. However, his teams are super, super balanced in terms of overall, good skill sets, but guys that aren't, crazy athletes or ones that will blow you away with their high school tape. Now we have the Big Ten, and the Big Ten is one of those conferences that has made a lot of noise this offseason. They're going to be making some additions, but let's talk about the core that they got right now. Ohio State is a perennial player, whether it was Urban Meyer or Ryan Day. They are insanely competitive. Ohio State produces so much NFL talent. It's unbelievable. And how they're able to consistently remain at the top is good. There's a lot of teams that, pull these big recruits, but aren't able to consistently put it all together like Ohio State does year after year after year, and their consistency is admirable. Another program that's on the rise, Michigan State. Mel Tucker's Michigan State Spartans, definitely a team that you have to keep your eye on. I mean, last year they were blowing people away, and that's a team that I'm really excited about moving forward. Mel Tucker's done a great job, preaching the discipline. It's going to continue to get better for recruiting. Michigan State football is always fun to watch. And then you've got to follow it up with Michigan. With Jim Harbaugh, there was a lot of questions if he's going to take off for the NFL. him and the Minnesota Vikings had mutual interest. The Vikings ended up backing out on that situation there and hired Kevin O'Connell. But Jim Harbaugh stays at Michigan, and he is going to continue to raise the ceiling of this team. And we saw it last year with, against Ohio State, how much emotions were filled, when they were able to, climb the mountaintop in that regard. Aiden Hutchinson was an absolute dog last year. David Ajabo, Blake Corum, I'm looking forward to this season. I think there's so much to love about what they've built as a culture. Penn State, James Franklin, he has a terrific program, continues to build on, success year after year. And I think once again, they're going to be in that conversation of contender. And I think another one as well that we have, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Those are some teams that are going to make some noise. They're going to be, hovering around that top 25 consistently. But overall, I like what this conference has to offer. And you also can't forget about Iowa. Iowa does a really, really good job year after year producing not only NFL talent, but they continue to produce at a very, very high level with a lot of, what they have to offer. So overall, collectively speaking, Iowa's in the mix. Maryland's another team you can't forget about. And even, quote, the bottom feeders of this conference, aren't that bad, really. I mean, Rutgers has always kind of been, quote, the laughing stock of the Big Ten, but Greg Schiano has done a terrific job with this program, rebuilding a little bit of program prestige and making them a formidable team moving forward. Northwestern's been down a little bit, but I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to continue to build that thing back up. And then how can you forget about the SEC? The most talked about conference, the most televised conference, the conference that everybody draws their attention to. Why? They get the biggest recruits on the biggest stage. And it's undeniable how great this conference has been over the last couple of years, or, just historically speaking. Alabama, perennial title contender every year, produces the most NFL talent you can think of under Nick Saban. Georgia, almost in that same boat. Now that they get a national title under their belt, this is a team that's going to be armed and dangerous with Kirby Smart. You have Brian Kelly over at LSU. Once again, a recruiting hotbed for Louisiana State University, but LSU is going to be in that conversation more and more. Once again, that program prestige carries that name, that Tiger name, a long ways. So LSU, you have Auburn as well. You have Tennessee, Florida. This is a conference that is absolutely loaded up. Ole Miss, Mississippi State. This is the conference that I'd like to tune into the most, but it's just the best conference in my opinion. The SEC is one of those conferences that you never want to miss a game. The rivalries are super intense. And that's honestly the case for, every conference. There's a lot of great rivalries, but I feel like the SEC takes it to another level. And you kind of think about where some of those teams are located. Alabama doesn't have a pro sports team. That elevates it. Mississippi does not have a pro sports team. That elevates the stakes there for those individual states that love college football in the South. This is a conference that you don't want to mess with. There's so much top end talent. There's middle tier talent. And even the lower end, you have Missouri and Vanderbilt. Once again, Missouri's had its moments. Vanderbilt is really struggling right now, but overall, this is a conference that is tough to beat, and it's undeniable how great they are. And once again, I have it pulled up here, far left-hand side. You will see the actual preseason rankings. A lot to love about the SEC, though. They got 1 and 3. I didn't even mention Texas A&M as well. Wow, what an absolutely stacked conference in that SEC. Kind of looking at it holistically speaking, a lot of great teams on here. I also included the others receiving votes to kind of show you the ideal value of that. Tennessee, Texas, Iowa, Penn State, Mississippi State, Auburn, Florida, Minnesota's on there as well. But overall, this kind of gives you a really good idea of where these conferences sit after talking about some of these teams. But yeah, I hope you appreciated the video. Had a lot of fun watching it because I enjoyed recording this one a ton. So thanks again for stopping by. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Also leave a like on today's video if you did enjoy the content. Once again, Make sure you stick around for that college football content because we will have a lot more videos coming out soon.